Okay, so in this tutorial we're going to look at compositing, and we're going to composite together some still images, animate them, duplicate them, and composite those with some video. Okay, so I'll just give you a little preview. Okay, so the first thing is to create a new project. If we call it compositing, if we can call it compositing ghost project. Okay, and then you will have downloaded the assets from Teams. The next thing is to import the assets. Okay, so if we bring those in, so again, a right click in the project window, import file, and navigate to where you've downloaded the assets to. Just make sure you save the project in the same place as the assets, so you've got everything kind of neatly in the same place. If you just control click to select both those files, the cup of coffee and the ghost, just make sure create composition is unchecked and import as footage is visible, and then import those two in. Okay, so first thing we want to do is just trim down our coffee cup clip. So if we double click on that, so it just is visible in the composition window, and then we can trim it down before we create the composition. So I'm just going to take, hopefully it's just a little bit slow rendering. I'm going to take the needle up to 6 because I'm just going to take this section at the end here where there's some steam coming out of the coffee, because we need that for the composition. So take to 6, click on the first marker here, so the in point marker, then take the needle to about 8 and then click on the out point marker. So we've just trimmed that down. Okay, that's all we need to do there. If we want to see the properties of any clips and how long they are, we can just click on the project window. If we look here, so the original clip is about 9 seconds long, and it's frame rate of 24 frames per second. So see the dimensions there as well, so we've got basic information there. If I know how to create the composition, I can just click and drag it down to the new composition button here, and that turns that into a composition, and that will appear now in the timeline. Okay, and you will see that that is just from frame 6 to frame 8. Now if we want to reset that, because we want this really to be 0, so if we just right click in the timeline window and go to composition settings, and then all we need to do is type in where it says start time code, just type a 0 in there. Okay, and you'll see that just sets that from 0 to 2 now, which is what we wanted. So we've got 2 second, should I say, composition. Okay, now we want to bring the ghost in as well. Now this is just a JPEG, it's not an MP4, it's not video. So we can just drag this in, just drag it till it's on top of the the video layer, and you can see it's on a black background at the moment. We're just going to hide the coffee cup layer because we want to create a mask around this. Okay, now to create a mask, if you remember, we click the pen tool. Just make sure, so this is an important point, because a little thing that trips people up sometimes, just make sure the ghost layer is selected, and then click on the pen tool, and then you're going to draw around the ghost. So you're effectively going to create the mask by drawing around it. Now the bit I've missed because I was rushing through that is we want to the mask is just going to kind of clip the bottom of the ghost here, because we're going to feather it a bit. Okay, remember you can click and drag if you want any curved lines. Okay, and then we close the mask. Now if we show the coffee cup layer, you'll see now that we've masked off the extra areas of black that were around the ghost, and we've just got we've kind of closed that in. We've not traced exactly around the ghost, but we've just kind of trimmed that off, particularly because we just wanted to clip off this this bottom half here. Again, you can still continue adjusting that. Okay. Okay, so to apply the feather I was talking about, if you click on the ghost layer and press M, that will show the mask properties. Now if we just expand the mask 1 completely, you'll see we've got various settings here. It's the feather that we're interested in, mask feather. So if we just turn that up a bit, you can see it kind of starting to feather the edges here. If you want to clearly see the feather, you want this path out of the way. If you just click on an empty space in the timeline window, then that gives you an idea of how much it's feathering. So it's really this area at the bottom that we're interested in at the moment. So if I just, let's just have a look at that. So that's fine, that's kind of feathered off quite nicely, it's fading away quite nicely, so I think we'll stick with that for now. You adjust it to whatever you think. Okay, so to get rid obviously this black area we don't want around the edge, so we can use blending modes to do this. Now blending modes are a series of preset modes that you can choose from. You'll find them in Photoshop as well, some of them might be familiar to you already. But if we go back to the ghost layer here, okay, just select the layer, and you see here under mode. Now if you can't see some of these settings here, see this button second from right at the bottom of the layer panel, you can just turn the additional settings on and off, toggle them on and off with that button. So we want to toggle them on, and then we can see the modes. Okay, so if you go to mode here, click on the drop down, and you'll see there's a great list here. Now the one that we want to use to reduce the black is screen. Okay, so these are a set of settings here in this section that tend to reduce and remove darker pixels. Okay, so if we select screen, and you'll see that nicely just removes the black pixels, so it's effectively now on a transparent background. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is apply an effect. Okay, and this particular effect is called CC Flow Motion, and what it does is it distorts the image around certain points that are called knots. Okay, so I'm going to just search for that. So if you go over to the effects and presets window here, okay, and in the search box at the top, if you just type in CC Flow, sorry, actually just flow will do it, it's probably a better bet. So just type in flow, and you'll see underneath distort section here we've got flow motion. Now if we drag that, we can drag that actually onto the object that we want to apply it to, which is the ghost. And you'll see that also in the effect control panels here, these appear, so we've got various settings as well. We've got knot 1 and knot 2 that I was talking about, and you can see here this is knot 1 and this is knot 2. So if I move knot 1, you'll see that its XY coordinates change as I move it in the effects panel there. Okay, so to just show you how this works, so remember this is knot 1. So underneath knot 1 we've got amount 1. Now if we increase that amount, you'll see that it kind of draws the pixels, the image, into that knot, okay, and kind of distorts them around it. Okay. Okay, so we're going to use this to animate the ghost around one of these knots. So I'm going to move knot 1 down to the bottom here, because we want the ghost to kind of emerge from the cup here. Okay, and then if we go to sorry, let me just click on ghost and then U. Sorry, my mistake, U won't work because we haven't applied the effect yet. So if we just expand the layer, and you'll see here we've got the effects subsection, then we've got flow motion under there. We can expand that, and then again we can see these settings here on the timeline as well. So basically we want to, with knot 1, we want to set it to 0 initially, okay, and we want our ghost to kind of emerge from the cup. So if we click on amount 1, okay, for knot 1, and just turn that up until it starts to disappear. Now one thing that will happen if you start to do this at the moment, it will it will start to what's called tile. So you'll get these kind of interesting kaleidoscope patterns, but we don't want those at the moment. So we need to make sure, see where it says tile edges here underneath effects controls, just turn that off and then you won't get that effect. So we basically want to just increase that value. It'd be about 64 until the ghost effectively disappears. Then if we take the playhead to about 12 frames and set that to 0, okay, and that will effectively make the ghost appear again. So it's going from this kind of disappeared state, and again it's kind of morphing around that knot back to appearing. Okay, and don't forget you can use the graph editor to change how quickly this appears. So we want him to appear fairly quickly. So if I turn on the graph editor with this particular setting selected, just make sure auto select graph type is turned on. You can click on this button here and select that, and then I can just sort of determine how quickly that appears. Sorry, turn easy ease on first. So if you remember here, click on easy ease and that will give us these handles, so then we can determine how quickly it appears. Okay, so you have a play with that as well. Okay, so we've made him appear. We want him to disappear again, so we can move the playhead along. We can select amount. Again, we can click on the timer to insert a keyframe. We can move the so we can use not 2, and we can make him disappear into not 2. So if we go to amount 2, okay, and then so we want it to start off as 0, so we'll set that to 0, and then we'll move that along. Okay, and then we want to insert a second keyframe. So remember, you can click on the relevant property, click on the diamond shape here to insert a second keyframe, and then we can change that value again to about 60, 70, 80 until he's disappeared. So effectively we've now got animated him appearing sort of out of the ether, to the air, and then disappearing. Sorry for my rendering isn't great on my machine at the moment, so there's some green patches there, but hopefully yours won't do that. Okay, so again we can use on this these second 2 keyframes, we can use the graph editor again. So if I shift click to select those 2, turn on the graph editor, and just I'm actually going to adjust the speed with this one. So if we go to edit speed graph, we'll get a slightly different graph, and then again we can shift click to select the 2 anchor points here. We can select easy ease, okay, which just eases off the in and out points, and then we can adjust the speed with which it disappears. So if I just modify the graph here, that will make it disappear more slowly at the beginning, and then the disappearance speeds up at the end here. Okay, so don't forget to have a play, because it is important to get used to fine tweaking speed and using the graph editor to tweak properties so you can really fine tune the movement. Okay, so the next thing we want to look at is another effect. So if we go back over to the effects and presets window, we're going to use one of the blur effects. So if we type in blur, and then you'll see, actually let me just turn that off for a sec. So just click on the X and it will go back to the original settings. So you see there's a series of blur and sharpen settings here, so they are grouped. Just expand that. You've got various options here. The one we're going to use for this is the fast box blur. So we can just select that and drag that over to the effect controls window, so we can see the effect controls for that underneath the flow motion that we used before. Okay, I'm going to turn graph editor off, and then we are going to make the ghost sort of go from quite blurred to less blurred. So you see that the fast box blur property appears underneath the ghost layer once we've dragged that across, and what we're going to modify is the blur radius. So if I turn the playhead back to 0, click on the timer next to blur radius, We're going to set it off fairly high, about 15, so it starts quite blurred, and then as it appears, as it comes into view, so at the moment that's on 15, but if we insert a second keyframe, so again you can click on the diamond shape here and just reduce that down to 5. Okay, and then it will tween that between the two, between the 15 blur of 15 to the blur of 5. So again, if I scrub the playhead, you can see that value changing as I scrub the playhead. Okay, so that's applied that. Okay, so the next stage is to animate the ghost. So I'm just going to click on the ghost layer and press U to just compress everything. So we want to scale him first of all, because we're actually going to duplicate him, because we're going to have a few multiple ghosts eventually. So click on the ghost layer, press S for scale, and then you can just change the properties here. But remember, you can change properties without actually inserting keyframes. So we don't want to insert a keyframe, we just want to scale him down. So we'll bring him down to about 50-ish. Okay, that looks fine. That looks fine. Okay, so we scale him down. Okay, next thing we want to do is animate his position, keyframe his position. So if we press U, so click on the ghost layer, press U, we can see everything that we've animated so far. Now we want him to start off sort of close to the cup, so I'm going to move him down so it looks like he's emerging from the cup. And then by the time the playhead gets to the end, when he disappears, if you remember here, so you can see the keyframes of what we've animated already. So by the time he gets to here, he's disappeared. So we want him to sort of be up near the top of the screen. So we're going to animate position. So if I press P for position, okay, and we can insert a keyframe here at the end. In fact, I'll press U again so we can still see the others. So we've got the position keyframe here. Just make sure you click on that again, make sure it's selected. Then we can drag it up to where we want it to finish up. Move the playhead back to the beginning. Okay, and again we can change his position, drag him back down to where we want him to start off. Again, we've got handles here on the motion tween here, so we can adjust so he doesn't just fly in a kind of linear line. So we can make him move around a bit. Sorry, I don't want to move the video. So if we scrub the needle, see how that looks. There we go. So we've got him kind of flying out the cup there. And again, we can maybe adjust the position a little bit if we want to. Maybe move him a bit lower. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Unfortunately, the green screen is flashing in a bit, but that's just a rendering issue to do with my computer. Don't forget, you can add as many keyframes as you want. So if I decide I want maybe a keyframe in the middle here, I can move the playhead to roughly where I want to put another keyframe. Click on the diamond, insert another keyframe, and then I can move the character, manipulate the handles around that new keyframe. So again, as many keyframes you want, many as you think is suitable, appropriate. Okay, so there we go. Now what I want to look at now is applying something called an expression, which is a really neat thing you can do. So if we go back to the ghost layer, click on the ghost layer, press R for rotation. So we've got the rotation property here. If we right click on that and select edit expression, we can actually type in various properties. Now there's one called the wiggle expression. So if we type in wiggle, okay, and then an open bracket, and then 2 digits we need to put after that. Now 3 is for how many times we want it to wiggle, and then a comma, and 50 is by or the next value is by how many degrees we want it to actually wiggle. So again, I'll leave that up to you, but I'm going to put in, it's going to wiggle 3 times, and it's going to wiggle by a maximum of 50 degrees each time. Okay, so it's quite neat. Press enter and that will apply that expression, and you can see now it's starting to, it kind of just moves around, or literally wiggles or rotates around. Okay, we're going to add something called turbulent displacement. So if you go back to effects and presets and search for turbulent, you'll see that effect will appear. We can drag that across to the effects and effect controls panel, and that will place that underneath the other two effects we've already added. Okay, so now we're going to look at animating turbulent displacement. So we've got the effect here. Now the setting that we're actually interested in, we can change the, let me just move the playhead so we can see the ghost. We can change the amount of turbulence here, okay, but we want to keep it a fairly decent sort of average value, so we're going to keep it at 50 so it's not too displaced. But what we can change is the what's called the evolution of the displacement here. Okay, so it basically changes the kind of angle of the displacement, and it's really useful this for creating, like I said, this kind of effect of, particularly on a light object that's floating like this, the effect of movement and wind, you know, passing through the object. Okay, so we can play with that. So we're going to animate that just to create this nice kind of wafting effect, I suppose you might want to call it. Okay, so if we click on the timer next to evolution here, just click on the ghost layer. If we press U, that will show us all the properties that have been animated, and you can see evolution's been added to that now. Okay, and it's inserted an initial keyframe as well. And then really we can move along the timeline here, and we can insert a keyframe wherever we think it's appropriate. So again, clicking on the diamond here, so I want to insert a keyframe here, just adjust the evolution a bit, the displacement, move along a bit more again. In fact, I don't even need to click on the diamond. If you remember, if I just change any values, it automatically inserts a keyframe, so it's probably a quicker way of doing that. And again, just keep shifting that along, play with the evolution a bit, and then we're getting this nice kind of effect that makes it look like it's kind of wafting around a bit in the okay, and then the final thing is if we just press U again just to compress that, we're going to duplicate the layer, so we're going to have more than one ghost coming out of the cut. So select the ghost layer, Control D, duplicate. I'm going to just sequence them manually, so I'm going to move this along a bit. If I move the playhead along, then I can see both of the ghosts, and then I'm going to move one of them. So if I move this second one, so again, sorry, do that again. So again, I can modify his motion path and move that somewhere else. Oops, excuse me. Okay, so we can move him somewhere else, and you can see we've got them slightly sequenced, appearing one after the other. Again, clicking an empty space to see it clearly. And there you go, we've got them, two of them emerging, and then I can continue duplicating that and sequencing and changing position. Okay, so, and again, obviously you can continue tweaking the various layer properties as well. Oops. Just a bit of practice at manipulating motion paths as well there. Okay, and then you can obviously duplicate as many times as you want. Okay, and that's our ghost animation. Okay, so that's an introduction to compositing.